Eric Lundstrom, editor-in-chief of PAX International and PAX Tech magazines. And today I have Lauren Costello of the International Flight Services Association in the United States and Fabio Gamba of the Airline Catering Association over in Brussels. We're here to speak about the new COVID-19 ACA IFSA guideline that was recently released. Well, I've read through the guidelines myself, and they're very specific and meticulously sourced. I've noticed through there. I've saw much of the footnotes and everything go back to the WHO, CDC, IATA, Food and Drug Administration. Did you work directly with a lot of the members of the associations and the groups like that to help work these guidelines?
Well, I can take that. You know, our goal was to really produce a cohesive global guidance. So I think you said the word meticulous. So our members really did comb through what was publicly available, you know, not necessarily direct interactions with representatives from those agencies, but they were very good at producing those materials for the public to consume, but it was just a lot of information. So looking at what was available, and both organizations did produce guidances more in the beginning of the pandemic, kind of spring, summer time period. IFSA a bit more focused on the US and ACA a bit more focused in Europe. And really the next stages for the two groups was to make this together, just so you didn't have to comb through all of the materials that were available. So really those were the fact sheets that the document was based on. It's a bit of an alphabet soup. You know, we also looked at at OSHA, WHO, a few other groups that you looked at. So really wanting it to be a global guidance from what was available that could be a little bit more digestible.
The guidelines, from what I've seemed to be able to work with several types of industrial food service operations. But airline catering, I can't remember who said this to me, but I've heard it in other places. It sort of falls in a line between what would be considered culinary and what can be considered industrial, and it sort of fills that area. What are the unique challenges of meeting this kind of operation with guidelines for COVID-19 that would sort of make it different from like a restaurant or like an industrial food service operation? Anyone care to tackle that?
Yeah, I can give it a shot. It's a good question, because we've been obviously focusing mostly at the very beginning when the concept was being worked upon on in-flight caterers. Obviously, that was the target audience, right? And when we produced the document and we presented it to as a final document to the members and to the outside community, we realized that you know, amongst the membership, there are a number of companies who are obviously doing in-flight catering, but not only. They're also active in other industries related to catering, right? And they said, well, actually, it's a great document because we can use it across the board, not only for in-flight catering, but also for, I don't know, events catering, you know, type of things, or, you know, catering for train or this type of things. Because in the end, you know, running a kitchen, whether it is for onboard catering, obviously you have a number of aspects, notably the transport from the kitchen to the aircraft, but that is not really so much the issue. The issue is where we're really addressing the operational needs at the kitchen, and that works across the board. So it was interesting to see that even though not only focused in-flight catering would use documents. That said, we had in mind, again, the in-flight catering as a target audience when we did that, and that's why we've really looked at this from an international perspective. So typically, I would say the feature of this document is that it provides standards that are risk-based to you know, the target audience, meaning that if you are a caterer at a given station in a given country and you're serving, I don't know, say 10 airlines, you would expect that these 10 airlines would have slightly differing, you know, perspectives and requests. And that's the beauty of documents, because it allows you to say as a caterer, well, this is a standard made by the professionals for the professionals. And so unless you have at home legislation that is stricter than what we have come up with in these documents, we suggest that these, based on empirical evidence and risk assumptions, that you follow this across the board. And that's gone down pretty well, honestly.
You talk about international standards and the international scope of this operation. And the next question is sort of as a practical matter. What about things like language barriers and interpretations? Is there a way to obtain these guidelines in other languages, or are they often translated on site to another company that downloads them and then has them translated?
Right now the guidance was developed in English, kind of as the de facto international language for the industry. We don't have an immediate plan to translate, but definitely welcome that opportunity, especially if it will, benefit the industry overall. So we welcome any opportunities to do any further translation of the document.
Yeah, and if I may add, as Lauren said, I mean, English being the lingua franca of aviation, it's true that the immediate reflex was to go and release that in English, and that was also a matter of time. So we didn't think of having it translated into different languages at the time. In hindsight, though, and depending on the demands, and as Lauren said, if there are requests for perhaps translation, we'd certainly consider it, especially in the ICAO language. So there's Arabic, Russian, Chinese, French, Spanish. I would say the usual, international languages would certainly give it, consideration.
Airline caterers, both in Europe and in the United States, deal with a wide variety of unions. Was there union input to this at all, and do you have some suggestions as to working with the unions to achieve your safety for the workers?
Yeah, but it's a good point. So my straight answer is we didn't work this together with the unions for a number of reasons. Perhaps the most important one being question of time that I mentioned. But having said that, and that is only valid in Europe, I wouldn't want to speak on behalf of what happens in other parts of the world, and certainly North America. But in Europe, as a trade body, you're forced into a dialogue with the employees via their unions. This is something that the European Commission is proposing, and so we did discuss mostly informally with the unions about that document coming up, and informally still I had a few union representatives who came back to see me at the margin of the meetings that we have every 2 months or so with the unions to tell me that they were extremely glad to have such a document come up, because they would, that would allow them to avail themselves from something that they knew their employers, their companies would follow, and that was made first and foremost for the safety of the employees. It's something that we shouldn't underestimate. We are in a labor-intensive industry here, and most of our workers were not allowed, were not able to do teleworking as in many other industries. And so they were and are still confronted every day to the COVID-19, and having something in place that is universally accepted as being the best standard is reassuring for them.
Lauren, there's union representation for the caterers in the States as well. Have you heard anything along those lines?
Similarly to Fabio, I mean, we didn't have them directly involved in the working group, but I think the ultimate takeaway is that the guidelines are focused on safety, and the safety is of those in the kitchens, those on the aircraft. So I think that they would be pleased with those results, and that their employers are, administering and referencing these guidelines to make the process safe. So it's certainly something that we can do in terms of an engagement level, but the ultimate plan of this is for the safety. And I think Fabio made a good point that these are the groups that can't be sitting in our home offices like us. They really need to be, on the front line and doing things for in-flight services, but doing other things like, event catering. Some of our caterers had to pivot to, provide food for those that were stranded on cruise ships, or for any other kind of, workers or things like that too. So that's really the focus, is the safety of the union. So something, again, that we would be welcome to opening up more of that dialogue.
Fabio, you've been the one that's talked quite a bit about the way getting the message out that airline meals are safe, and they don't carry a virus, or they don't and I wonder how successful have you been to getting that message out?
Well, first, it's not our message. I have to say that what we've done was to relay messages that were coming from, such institutions as the WHO and others at a local level. But it's true that this is a message that's been constantly repeated throughout the pandemic, at the very beginning, from the very beginning on, and it's true that this is something that we have built on. So it is something that we have really insisted, not so much in terms of where our food is not a vehicle for the spread of the pandemic, but rather to say, that doesn't exonerate us from making sure that the people working in this industry, our people, are doing it in a safe way. So we've really looked at this, mostly from the industry to the industry, sort of a B2B message, even though, of course, we relayed the message from the WHO and others to say that there was no fear for the traveling public to have from what they had in front of them. And so I think it's an important distinctions to make, because obviously we are not inventing anything. We're just relaying messages that are being made by scientists. So we relay what science says in a certain way, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Just to comment on that, everything is backed by science, and there hasn't been really any credible evidence that COVID is transmitted via food. As research evolves, things are still coming out, different strains popping up. So we certainly are keeping a pulse on that and up to date on any research. But right now, we are deferring back to the science, and looking at what that is, and to make sure that all of the resources and everything, all the focus is put on what is actually the science backed, to make sure that there's no consumer worry or things like that. So also, I think our members are doing a really good job. They are armed with the information from the agencies backed by science, so they're the ones that are really instilling the confidence. Our members are taking all the right precautions. They're communicating to their passengers and making determinations on their in-flight offerings from planning, cost, experience perspectives. And like Fabio mentioned, as our trade associations, we're not going directly to passengers, but certainly giving the members everything we need to make sure that safety is the bottom line, and keeping a pulse on that. Should anything change, we'll be on top of it. But until we have, the evidence to do so, it's safe.
Final question. We all expect at some point that travel will resume, and coping with this virus will be something of a diminishing priority. At least that's what we're all hoping at some time. At that time, will these guidelines still be a large and important part of an airline catering operation? Is this with us for infinity now?
I hope the case is that we'll return to normal, and this will be a diminishing priority, but don't have a crystal ball just yet. But I think it's something that's always good to remain handy. There's different vaccines are coming out, which is great. However, there are a few new strains being introduced. So this document kind of serves as even an addendum to company crisis plans, and really can be used as necessary. It is focused on COVID, but really, as other things come available, it can be used for other epidemics, pandemics as needed. So hopefully less and less will have to refer to these, but until then, it's a good guide, and I cannot wait to travel again and have that food and beverage in flight.
Fabio, anything to add?
No, I think Lawrence said it all. It's true that we've tried to come up with a document that obviously is related to COVID-19, but that, or if you will, the concept of which can be applied to any other pandemic of any sort. So this document will remain valid in its approach today as well as tomorrow. So this is something that we highly recommend for everyone to keep at hand, in the hope, obviously, that for the next time, we're only talking about a very remote future for a possible next pandemic. But yeah, indeed, as Lauren said, this document is universally valid, and it is today, and it will be tomorrow.
Lauren mentioned at the beginning of this that there was a number of volunteers that have been involved, that were involved in putting these guidelines together, and I think it's worthwhile to note and acknowledge some of the important people who were involved in preparing them. And the list here goes, and I hope I get these names right. We can start with Roberta Swenson Moore from Delta Airlines, who is retired, Manjit Sohal and Adam Simonson from Donata, Marianne Arzanya from Flying Food Group, David Walks, Norbert Vandenberg, and Richard Davis from Gate Group, Ulrike Enneking, Rosemary Miranda, and Jian Shi from LSG Group, Fabian Malbranc from New Rest, Laurie Tansey of Quality and Regulatory Innovations, LLC, Leanne Yep from SATS, and finally, Spring Savage from WestJet up in Canada. And it was a monumental effort, I'm sure. So now I'd like to thank both Fabio and Lauren for answering these questions today. And we will keep track of these guidelines, and feel free to update us at any time you have an open invitation.
Will do.
Thank you again, and have a good day.